It's actually phase two, and the benefits have to be removed from the override question on the school side.
Right. Right. And I think we ought to decide that first. I think that, you know, and then we can decide whether or not, you know, we're gonna do an override or not gonna do an override. But I think first.
Well, but I think that, my sense is that if there's not,
Parcel.
if, kind of, because if there's not support for an override, then I think there's a bigger issue in terms of handing over the money. While you're thinking about that, gentleman in the back.
My name is Mike Kirby from 4 Parsonage Lane, and under the specific question of whether an override should appear on the ballot, I actually wanted to just personally express my sentiments. I agree completely with Mr. Dardino's sentiments earlier, that I believe it's actually, you know, the board is charged with the fiduciary responsibility to determine and make the difficult decisions, not necessarily put, you know, all of those issues back to the townspeople themselves. I'd also encourage you to look forward, given that we've recognized that there's a potentially structural issue. There is certainly a potential for a need for a requested override for FY10, I think, if I have all my years correct, which if we have an override request last year which failed, if we have an override request this year, which I believe the majority of folks would believe is the likely outcome, we could then be headed into a third override request, you know, 3 years running, which I think actually breeds a level of cynicism amongst the public that we should be cognizant of. If you ask repeatedly for an override year after year and you get told no, I do think you end up losing the ability of a number of people to think rationally and to essentially really listen to reasoned judgment if they start to feel like the folks just don't hear what the message is. So it also seems to, though it is obviously a judgment call that this board is charged with making, but it seems to me that it's also not necessarily a question of whether you believe an override will or won't pass. It's really whether you believe an override should or shouldn't pass in terms of what your own personal sentiment is. And I just ask that each of you ask yourself that question. And if the answer is no, then I don't think it should actually be put on the ballot at all. That's just my personal sentiment.
I mean, if you don't think you're going to vote for an override here on the board, if you're going to vote for it personally, then I don't know how you can recommend it to other people. But I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think that is absolutely it. I mean, we have responsibility here to do what's right for the people of North Reading, and I think that is the right answer. I mean, and we talked a little bit about leadership, and I understand Mr. Vino's position, absolutely. But, you know, if you ask for an override and they say no to you, it just sets up a pattern where we ask when we really need one, and they'll say no again, okay, because that is the pattern. What about no, don't you understand? And that's what I think the vote will be this year. If you go for an override, I think people will vote and they'll say, what about no, didn't you understand last year? So how does that serve this town? How does that help us when we need an override and we won't be able to ask for one because they vote against us? So to me, I just can't see it. I don't think it's, that's our job. Our job is to make the tough decisions, and I think that's what we're doing. So to make tough decisions and then throw it back to the electorate, to me, I don't agree with that.
I think there's two dimensions to this override question. A piece of the override question, specifically the sewer, is really giving the public a decision of whether they want to pay for it in their taxes, which, by the way, is tax deductible, versus pay for it as a fee. So it's not like, you know, one way or the other, the trash is going to be paid for. You might say the recreation kind of falls into the same category, except recreation, if it's gone to fee-based, falls on the users, right, of which is a smaller amount. It's not shared by the whole community. So then the other things, I guess, we talk about in a, you know, we're cuts in services. Yes, John.
Yes, if I could. But I want to thank the gentleman who just spoke, because I want to thank you for your second part of that, which said, if we believe it should pass, we should put it on. I believe it should. I don't know if it will or not. That's why I'm willing to put it on, because I believe it should be there.
Well, you know, that gets to the other issue, is on the should part of it, right? A number of board members voted to put into the override cuts that were made, right?
Right? I agree.
Which I got to believe that you put them there because you felt they were needed.
Absolutely.
And therefore, you know, those that did that should be, I would think that they would be supporting an override.
All right,
I think
they're
if you're
not.
gonna go for an override, you put out,
they're not.
you put out everything that was cut. That's what I believe, if you're gonna go for one, but I don't believe we should be going.
Yes.
I have something that's a bit out of the box here. I did a little bit of math just now, and I found that if we could compromise with the school committee on something, if we took $50,000 out of the 384, and we restored $25,000 to the recreation budget, and we restored the position in the assessor's office, we could give them 5.8 teachers, which would essentially only cut half a teacher that they want from priority two. That would satisfy me completely, and I would forego an override question if we needed to. I don't know how everyone else feels.
You would
about
vote
it.
against an override if we made that adjustment?
If we made that adjustment, I could see not having to go for an override.
I could agree to that, if it meant not having an override.
It would give us essentially 6 teachers.
I mean, it's a possibility. The school's got a wide open budget. They can, in fact, take a look at that
It's
and,
a bit of an out-of-the-box solution,
No,
and
look
it
what-
would satisfy me to a degree. I still don't want to see all these cuts happen on the town side, but it would restore the assessor's office, and it would
not assessed.
assuage a little bit.
Treasurer's.
Treasurer's office, I apologize.
Make a motion, Michael.
And it would assuage a bit of the hit that we put on recreation. I know it's not everything you asked for.
Yeah.
But it's something, and I think we could do, I think it's something we could compromise with the school committee on. I don't
You
know.
give me the numbers, I'll make the motion. What are the numbers?
Mr. O'Leary.
I guess what I'm losing sight of or not catching here, we realize the savings on the insurance premiums of, in the vocational school of $384,000. Nothing's changed since last week, other than that. My priorities haven't changed, my decisions haven't changed. The only thing that's changed is the number. The bottom line number that would be required to fully fund the school needs as were presented to us and a lot of us bought into as being a priority to the extent that we've made a significant amount of headway in getting to a certain point here, almost all the way to priority 2 now with this additional, the additional funds that are available. But nothing else has changed. I'd like to see the whole thing funded. I think what we've done again to the school department over the last 2 years has been devastating, and the effects of it are being felt already. And what we're going to try and do here is catch up a little bit and not even get ahead. We're not talking about getting ahead. We're not even talking about, we're just trying to get to where we were previously 3 years ago. So that hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed is that the amount of money that will be required to get us to priority number 3 and restore some of the cuts that were suggested by the board members here last week, and that's not all of the cuts, is now down to $830,000 instead of $1.2 million. So now we're just, we're back to, should we have an override or shouldn't we have an override? I think we're all in agreement that what's been proposed, and again, we went through several hours of discussion last week and the week before, what's been proposed to go in the override budget were all important. And important to the extent that all of us, individually and collectively, said, these are all important things. Now, there were some other things that maybe I would have taken out and put other things in, but for the most part, there's no real disagreement on the suggestions that were made to put into the override. I just see the number has changed, nothing else.
You think, but that's for you. For you, nothing's changed. For me, something substantial's changed.
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to
My
understand.
goal, my goal from day one, every finance committee meeting, every time we met, my goal was not to have an override, because I do not believe that's in the best interest of this community. I saw what happened last year, it was not in the best interest of this community, okay? And I do not feel, and I feel that has been my goal since day one. So the $300,000 gets us to a point where we can all live with what we got. That's my feeling. Can I ask you what your numbers were again? And I'll make a motion. I'd like to hear what people think.
What I put together was I took the salaries for the teachers that they wanted to hire.
Yeah, how much for the schools?
And I divided it out by 6.5, and I came up with 47,495
Yeah.
per teacher. And the benefits, 9,934.62.
So how much for the school?
I added those two together. So the school would get $334,000, $334,281.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
took $50,000.
Yeah, take $50,000.
Took 50,000 off the 384,281.
All right, and
Yeah,
then the
exactly.
50,000 will go where?
It would go to restoring the treasurer position.
25 and 25.
$5,000 to the recreation fund.
Okay. I move that we allocate the existing funds, $343,000, $280 to the schools, $25,000 to rec, and $25,000 to the collector's position, the
334.
334.
334?
334,281.
334, 281. And then, now, is that the whole number
Yeah, that's the whole.
that we had available?
It was
The
384.
11,000, we had 11,000 extra?
What
25,000, I move that we do allocate $343,000 to the schools to fund priority two. 334, 280.
81.
$25,000 to rec, and $25,000 to the collector's position.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded, just before we go on any further. We had a total of additional revenue of $377,810.
Plus the vote.
Plus the votes.
I'm sorry, $384,281.
281.
And Michael wants to take 50 off of that.
Right.
Exactly.
Right? So that's 334,281. And the school, in order to do phase 2 of the school, they needed 373,293, right?
Right.
334,281, 210,992. So they're $30,000 short. $29,000 actually short.
And it would restore 5.8.
Did I do that right, Steve?
It would restore 5.
39,012.
And it would restore.
Oh, 39, right, I'm sorry. 30.
And it would restore 5.8 teachers, which is essentially 6.
So the question is, in terms of revenue estimates, in terms of everything else, can we shave $39,000 more? Just asking the question, town administrator.
What would you like me to do, sir? I'm sorry,
Well,
I missed,
you know, there was some talk about, well, if we're within $50,000 of a balanced budget, effectively, we have a balanced budget.
That was a few years ago.
Well, I'm
Now we're
just,
talking nickels.
well, I mean, you know,
Right.
we're all estimates here.
so what do we need, what is your question? I'm sorry.
Well, and the question
What's
is,
another
of all,
30
in our revenue estimates,
Right.
okay, and our expenses, right, well, we're already taking care of the expenses, right? We could meet what Mike is proposing and provide the entire funding for this phase 2 of the school if we had another $40,000.
Oh, you're asking me to come up with $40,000 in revenue?
Now,
I'm just asking you to, I'm just asking you,
Personal contributions be greatly appreciated.
Well, I mean,
we can pass the hat, you know?
I hate to do,
No, just-
I hate to
no.
do budgeting on the fly, so
Okay.
we'd want
Alright.
to take a
Hold them back.
look.
All right, well, we have a motion.
yeah, we get a motion, let's do that
We have
first.
a motion on the floor, and the FinCom has an opportunity to comment on it, so please do. Don?
Don Kelleher, 3 Sandsboro Lane. I think it's a reasonable compromise. I don't think that going back and trying to find another $40,000 in the general government budget or to manufacture revenue that isn't there to make this thing work makes any sense. I think the proposal to ask the schools to find $40,000 within their total budget to make this thing work is not at all unreasonable. That's
They could
my
just,
view.
they could have that based on their hiring, right? We all know that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we have a motion, and we may be a little closer to coming to an agreement.
We have a second?
We have a second. Do we have
I-
any further discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah, discussion, but,
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Defer to
Steve.
Joe.
What?
I'll defer to Joe.
No, either way.
Mr. Chairman?
I,